Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon.
We welcome for this webinar series on the occasion of International Day of Yoga, on the theme of would like to share the thoughts on yoga as a process of for the thought management. So thoughts, that we are made up of our personality are made up of the way that we think. So we are what our thoughts have made us, and that's why it has been told that we have to take an utmost care of what we think. And it has been very well noted in our philosophical treatise that the thoughts they leave and they travel very far and they make a very big impact on other people also. So why these thoughts are very important is because to develop a human excellence or for a holistic development. So we know this from the physical to intellectual to emotional to social, moral and spiritual well-being are very, very important. And these things are determined by the thought culture, or how do we sculpt our thought is what that determines the efficiency of all these different arenas of our personality. Alexis Carrel, a Nobel laureate, has written a wonderful book. The book is called as Man the Unknown. In this particular book, the first half of the book gives everything about the physiology that what we know, but the second half of the book tells about the unknown dimensions of the man. And in that particular book, he gives this particular two important statements. He says that intellectual power is augmented by the habit of precise reasoning, study of logic, use of mathematical language, mental discipline, complete and deep observations. On the contrary, incomplete and superficial observations, rapid succession of impressions, multiplicity of images, they hinder the development of mind. Today, we are seeing that the mental discipline is not being catered too much, nor the generations have that ability for the complete and deep observation. And the most abuse of the, say, technology, there will be a rapid succession of impressions and images, which, according to Alexis Carrel, it hinders the development of mind. So when these things are happening, why do we don't cultivate this, the quality of a deep observation? And when we encourage the habit of having the multiple impressions on the mind at a given point of time, is what that results in mind wandering. So what is mind wandering? Even though it is a normal faculty for everybody of us, so it is a shift in the contents or the thought away from the task that is given to us, or maybe from the external environment. That is all of it's our experience. Probably if you are reading something, without the knowledge or the conscious awareness of us, the mind slips into different thoughts, into multiple thoughts, unrelated thoughts, and suddenly we realize, no, I have to concentrate on this, and we'll get back to our mind to the whatever we are reading or whatever the work that we are intending to. So this faculty of mind wandering, which is biologically there, and the first aspect of controlling of our thought is to channelize this mind wandering, right, into the task that is given or the object that we are supposed to focus. If you look into the mind wandering, 2/3 of these self-generated mind wandering, the content of this mind wandering, it will be more that the content which are close to our emotions or some or other kind of emotions that we have encouraged all these years. And it has been noted that more than say 30 to 50% of our wake time we spend in mind wandering. And why generally the people, especially the youngsters, like in the mind wandering? Because it is associated with some sort of positive emotional effect or the positive valence. But this mind wandering is, it has to be channelized so that all our the fullest capacity of our focus or the attention is given to the work that is assigned to us, so that it will be there will be a very good output. So even last couple of lectures also you have heard that if you look at this, we have in our brain two important aspects of the brain. This is the yellow aspects over here, or the white aspect in this image of the brain, right? It's called the old part of the brain, which we have inherited along the evolutionary path. And you have this orange part, or this part which is cortical brain, which through the evolution where at the time of the human stage, and we have developed it. And this, the primitive part of the brain, which is mostly related to the limbic cortex, it is associated with all our emotions and all our logical thinking, critical thinking, intellectual capabilities, creativity. All these things is possible only when we have developed this cortical brain. So the interaction between these two parts of the brain and efficiency of interaction between these two parts of the brain is what determines at any given point of time if a person is focused on a given object or on a given task, or his mind is wandering everywhere. So that is to say that it's the primitive part of the brain is more of emotional in nature. And if we encourage the same thoughts consciously again and again, so with the concept of plasticity changes, the limbic cortex could become more stronger compared to the cortical area, which is involved in a lot of cognitive and our intellectual capabilities. So with this particular background, so we know that in our ancient Indian psychological and philosophical text, so these Harishadvargas are mentioned, where irrespective of the content of the emotional thought, but these are the different types of emotions, right, that anybody else is existing and which is present biologically in us, and of course which has to certain level of importance as far as our survival and also to certain aspect of our mental life is concerned. So thus we know it is kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, and matsar. But it's our experience. If we can see, suppose if I become an angry, the anger that comes to my conscious expression is so automatic. And if a jealousy is there, jealousy doesn't say that okay, jealousy is coming and I'll express my jealousy. See, all this characteristic is so spontaneous and it's so automatic. Within a fraction of a second of time, it comes to our conscious perception. So that's why probably this could be called as the very automatic negative thoughts. The important is they're to certain extent they could be negative, but of course they have also a positive valence depending on the context. But most important is they're very automatic, and it is biologically it is ingrained right in our brain. And these things are not learned behavior. Probably no workshop or anything will be learned when they say, okay, you come to a workshop where training is given to how you to make an anger or how to develop a jealousy. It's not like that. But on the contrary, if we want to develop those qualities which we need to control these Harishadvargas, there we need a lot of training. But the most important with that of the neural plasticity changes is all these if you harbor these negative qualities consciously again and again and again, it leads to self-destructions. So all focusing on these negative thoughts leads to self-destruction. And if I focus on them, they become more and more powerful. So that is to say that the old part of the brain or the limbic part of the brain, it becomes more powerful than the cortical part of the brain if a person consciously, right, he gives encouragement to these thoughts. And also during mind wandering, the content of the thoughts, if we can categorize those contents, it will be more than 90 or 95% of our thoughts, it will be in the any of these particular these categories. So because it is so powerful and it is biologically it is wired in our brain, so that's why it becomes very, very automatic. So when it is powerful and when it is very much automatic, right, it needs to be harnessed, for which a training is needed. So that's the reason why if the this training is not given to harness, right, these Arishadvargas, is could be one of the reason why in the developmental age, in the adult or adolescent period of time, why these young teens, they're very impulsive, right? They have always an intense emotion. They lack a self-reflection because any emotional stimuli that comes to them, it will be in their, say, in their limbic area, and the output, it will be of very emotionally, and they'll be very reactive in nature. But on the contrary, if the same emotional stimuli, it goes to the cortex and then it comes an output, it will be an emotional response. So we have two different categories of emotional reaction and emotional response. But for a person to be more responsive for any of these emotional stimuli to come, for the person to choose how to respond to any emotional stimuli, for the person to be more flexible, right, in its output, and to integrate all these things, right, his cortical development or the training of the cortex plays a very, very important role. So this particular thing is called as high road, and for all our management of our thought or management of our emotion, so this particular path, it plays a very important role. So nature has given this cortex so very well, so that all our training, whatever we train ourselves mentally, right, it gets embedded in this particular cortex, and these two areas of the brain has to be very well bidirectionally connected to get an emotional response. Now, what is the first step towards to get this emotional response? William James, who's father of neuroscience and psychology, he has told that a faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is a very root for judgment, character, and will. So first we have to understand that even that William James says that if we can focus the wandering mind to a given task, is what the root or the first step, not only for the development of the faculty of concentration or the focus, even for the higher cognitive abilities like judgment, to develop the will, and also for the character development. The further he says that our education system should, or any education system will be a par excellence if the system will teach that the way to improve this particular faculty of attention. And he further says it is easier to define this ideal than to give a practical directions for bringing about it. So William James has a very good hypothesis that wandering mind has to be concentrated, for which the higher cognitive abilities could be developed, but he didn't have the way that how to do it. So the answer is always, it comes from the Eastern, our psychology and our philosophy, for which yoga plays a very important role. Whenever we are practicing of yoga, of any type of yoga, either it could be an asana to pranayama or to dharana, or even to the dhyana to certain extent of the meditation. All these four components, it's are involved. So first of all is that of attention regulation. Even at the asana stage, whenever doing any asana, attention, the instruction is given is to pay attention for your, say, bodily sensations, or pay attention for your postures. And also we have sensation of body awareness. All the sensations that is reaching to your brain, right? Whenever you're doing a posture or a pranayama or meditation, that you should be aware of that. Means you should look into these sensations from a third person perspective, not attaching emotionally to these thoughts and linking those particular thoughts. And also, and these two exercises which also bring about this emotional regulation. Now all these three processes play a very important role, right, in sculpting the thought. And do we have any basis or the way the brain works with all these things? There's a lot of evidences today that it has come that yes, if you practice yoga or any form of yoga, right, all these three four components coherently make a very big impact on the brain and also on the mind. So going back to Patanjali, Patanjali Maharshi in his Yoga Sutra has described this particular, say, a basal state of mind or a mind wandering or different stages of mind into four different types. First is Mada. He is very dull, lethargic, forgetful, the state of mind. Then he gives a disturbed state is Vikshipta. That is, this mind is always wandering, it is troubled, it has a lot of negative experiences, it is very restless, and thus particular mind is not control over itself. So these two states, whether it is a dull state or a disturbed state, is the two states which he described. Then subsequently a much more finer state he described, the Kshipta state. This mind is quite distracted, it wanders a lot, but it has a capacity to occasionally to get focused. So Sage Patanjali says the dull mind and the disturbed mind, if at all, if it depends on the which state of mind at rest the person is, it has to be trained to get into to Kshipta state, where occasionally the capacity of the mind to be focused is developed. After the Kshipta state, a person can develop Ekagrata state, that is focused state of mind, where he is concentrated on a task, and during any given task, during concentration, it is undisturbed, it is unaffected, and it is uninvolved in any of the other stimuli. So if you have any other noise, so noise is doesn't disturb a particular person, and he just concentrate on the signal. And elaborate practice or the long practice of this Ekagrata is what is gradually transformed into a mastered state of mind. This is called a Niruddha state of mind, where the mind is completely controlled, it is well regulated, and it is well restrained. So most of us, right, we will be in the Kshipta, in the healthy individuals will be in the Kshipta state of mind, where we have the occasional capacity where we get focused, and of course more than 30 to 50% during our wake time we wander a lot. So Maharishi Patanjali states this is the state of mind where person can really start, right, the practicing the psychological principles or the psychological practices of any of this yoga. But if somebody is very dull and very disturbed, right, they have to be brought to Kshipta state, and then they can get focused, and subsequently they can be mastered. So if we have both this dull and Vikshipta state of mind, how do we make this Kshipta state of mind? So it will be full with the high amount of this physical activity. It can be, say, like, for example, like fast Surya Namaskara, or it can be jogging. So any of this high physical activity, it has been practiced, right? Then, so they develop the disturbed mind, right? Subsequently, with other practices, it becomes Kshipta state. It subsequently we develop an ability to get focused. So now we'll try to understand from the neuroscience point of view, why do we get this mind wandering, and how does these yoga practices can help to strengthen certain areas of this network. So if we look at the brain in the earlier slide which I showed, where these lot of emotions are emerged in the limbic cortex, right? It is also one of the part of the brain. We call it as default networking part of the brain. Default networking means that at the default, these areas of the brain will be always will be active. So there are many components in the default networking of the brain, but we don't go into the details. But we have one part of the brain, right, which is associated uh, with the temporal lobe, right, where a lot of these episodic memories are stored and it is released. So all our memories, or the episodic memories, or all of emotional memories, right, it will be in this default mode of this medial temporal lobe of default networking part of this brain. Now, so generally, we know that mind wandering is so disturbing sometimes, right? So this will have a source of variability. I mean, it disturbs the task that a person was supposed to do. So the source of variability or source of disturbance is always in this medial temporal lobe of default mode of networking, which is the source of all this, this episodic memory. Then, but these episodic memories are very important. Now, now sometimes it's our experience that if these episodic memories, right, if we can internally cognize or the orient our cognition to internally about this episodic memory. So at that point of time, so what we can experience is that all our thoughts, right, we anchor to say one type of an episodic memory, and because of the internal oriented cognition, so which is brought about by another area of the brain, we call it default networking core area of the brain, right, and this brings about some constraints on the mind wandering. That is, this episodic memory will not go here in a unrelated spectrum, but when we internally try to orient our cognition on this, all our other thoughts will be around one particular, say, memory or one particular feeling, right, and it will be around that. So whatever the variability that is produced by this episodic memory can be constraints by our internal cognition, number one. Third is that we have a dorsal attention network, which is focused for the external attention, right? So we have an external attention, we have some work, or you concentrate on an object, you concentrate it on a holy picture, you concentrate on, say, on a god idol or anything which is on external orientation. So at that point of time also, right, we can control, or we can have some constraints on the on this episodic memory. But important thing is, even when we do asana or any of these physical postures in yogasana, right, so we have to concentrate not only external attention, but also on our sensations, that is coming up, arising from the body. So even at that point of time, our dorsal attention network drives its attention to the sensation that is driving from the body. And so these two, right, will also control these episodic memory or the dorsal network of the temporal lobe, right, which will automatically give rise to heterogeneous types of these thoughts. Now, if it is an internal cognition, or it can be an external cognition, but we have certain other network we have called as that is ventral attention network, which is very sensitive for the salience. That is some type of a new type of an experience. Like, so you're practicing, say, a posture, then you feel something really a new type of experience, right? So that will have little bit constraints, right, on your the mind wandering. Or right, or it can be an completely an external agent, right, which will grab our attention, right, that will also, right, bring about some constraints on the on this mind wandering. So we have this what is called as BAN, that is salience network, is ventral attention network. But important thing is these thoughts that is coming in the mind wandering, right? It can be linked either to the internally oriented cognition, or it can be controlled even for the externally oriented cognition. So we have the capacity to internally orient, or also to the focusing on the external, and also bring about this controlling of this say mind wandering, or the series of this episodic memory that comes. But otherwise, it's very most important is this is frontoparietal network that we get, where we can deliberately constrain the thought. Now this, where at a will we can constrain the thought. It can be from the internally oriented cognition, or it can be even for the external attention also. So we have this particular capacity, which is very much the part of our frontal cortex, that is the cortical part of the brain, which I showed you earlier. Now so to develop the capacity of this cortical network, and all this network plays a very, very important role, right, in controlling, or the mind wandering, in control, or to focus the attention. Now suppose, say for example, that we during our practice of any yogasana practice, or pranayama practice, or it can be say dharana or meditation practice, whenever we get these, say, some sensations that is arising, say from the body, and when it goes to the dorsal attention network, see, the instruction is, right, not to emotionally attach to this particular sensation, and just to observe that. And these sensations, it comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. So with this, we are also learning the having an emotional maturity, that we are not emotionally entangling to a particular sensation. If something pain, we are not supposed to react, it's a pain for me. Or if it is very, say, blissful, or it is very happy, so I cannot say, this practice is very happy for me. So you should be as a samatvam, that is as a third person perspective, where you are entering with all these emotions. Now all these networks, that is your internal orientation towards your episodic memory, or maybe the sensation that is arising, or your deliberate constraints over the thought, all these three networks actively play an important role in all the practices of yoga, from asana to dharana, even to dhyana. And repeatedly practicing this with the principles of neural plasticity, these networks, they get very, very strong. Not only strong, they become very flexible. Now what do you mean by flexible? The flexibility is that we can say shift from the activity from one network to the another network, right, and or to some other network. Say for example, the deliberate constraint from the frontoparietal network is the most strongest. So where it can suppress, right, all these emotions, and as a one pointedness, okay, it can be focused on a particular object, which is very good for your intellectual development. So that is going to happen. Now this internal oriented cognition is going to happen, right, and with all these two, so where we can develop the emotional flexibility and emotional valence. Now the appropriate activity of all these three circuits is very important to become, or to develop another capacity, right, for the creativity. Because if a person wants to be more creative, so it's not that he suppresses all his episodic, the thought pattern that comes, but at the same time he has to have a feedback mechanism, or he should keep what all the other sensation that is arising from the sensory motor area. So to understand that particular emotions and adjust accordingly. And also you should consciously know about his salience network that is coming up. So when there is the capacity that we develop to shift, right, with all these three networks, is the emergence of all this creative ideas also will come. Now, any abnormalities in these networks is what is proposed that will get some of the disorders of various thoughts. Say, for example, in depression. Say in depression that uh, the person is ruminating. So he has one type of a thought or a memory, and there is a negative variance. So because he is not in a position to really understand the bodily signals that is coming up, which is very detrimental to him, but he's fixed on to one type of that particular memory, and is ruminating with that particular thought. We call it as a rumination. But but in a depressive patient, right, there will be his intention that he needs to control, but he is not in a position to control, but he cannot deliberately consent his particular thought. So there could be some defect in this particular pathway. Or or say, for example, some defect in this particular uh, DAN, that is DAN, where we have this episodic memory, a series of unrelated episodic memory, it arises, a particular person behaves, and he cannot even constrain even that, because he cannot internally cognize this, nor a person can externally deliberately, he constrain this particular a series of thought that is coming up, which is a very characteristic of, say, about ADHD kids. Or it could be that you have this an excessive um, response to any sensory stimuli, that is going to come up over here. A person becomes more anxious. So so this particular network, so it gives then a hypothetical network of how different kinds of these thoughts can be managed by internally orienting, and also by externally constraining these particular thoughts. And yoga helps in managing not all these networks. So this is how the brain regions that is involved in all this mindfulness meditation technique. So we have this core, the emotional part. It's told you about amygdala and striatum, although which raises the emotions. We have this precuneus and posterior cingulate, which helps for our salience and sensory feedback that comes. Then you have this medial prefrontal cortex, which the area where we can have a deliberate constraints on the thoughts that are emerging. So this particular area is where the mind wandering happens, and we can have a deliberate constraints on this by activating the front part of the brain, or the prefrontal cortex. And also we can constrain this with our um, new experiences or the sensations that is arising. That is to show that all these three networks are optimally active with our meditation practice. So that is, so we have a mind wandering. Suddenly we became aware of the mind wandering. We call it as a metacognitive ability. So that, and then I shift my focus to whatever the work that needs to be done. So this particular cycle, it will be going on. So we have this focusing and defocusing, and focusing and defocusing. So as the person practices, right, this shift between focus and defocus is what slowly it reduces. That is vikshipta, kshipta state of mind, it becomes ekagra state of mind. And when the ekagra state of mind, it becomes highly controlled part of the mind. So the switching and part from kshipta to ekagra, that is mind wandering is there, and we have a shift to, so which will happen in the initial stages. So it's all of our experience. Then, so where insula part is involved, then we maintain the focus for, say, a certain period of time. again we have focus and defocus, but after a long period of time, so it becomes habit, and habit, so automatically our mind is trained to focus on a given object or a given subject or a given an internal thought, and without consciously being disturbed by the other noise that comes, and the striatum part of the brain is it is involved with that. So when is that we need to understand or to uh, build this capacity of the frontal cortex? So if we can really encourage all our youngsters to practice this at the adult and adolescent age of years, where the frontal area of the brain is at peak of its development, okay, it really helps a lot, and it helps in for the impulse control, proper planning, decision making, all these higher abilities, higher cognitive abilities, it can be learned by our youngsters. Not only about these youngsters. So how is that we can really train this thought management even at the very young age level? So one of the great neuroscientists, Damasio, has told that very good appropriate stories. So he says stories appears to be a fundamental way in which brain organizes their information in practical and in a memorable manner. So the stories to the young kids, motivating stories to the young kid, the stories that are involved with high ethics. So these things, plays a very important role in formation of these episodic memories in these kids, right? And when grandpa or grandma they tell these stories, kids they try to focus on the story. Not only to focus on the story, they have their imagination also develops. So all these three happens, right, even with this story. So a good appropriate with high value storytelling, right, is also uh, a way of life uh, which our ancestors has given, and also it's a yoga way of life, and it also plays a very important role in the cultivating thought management even at the kids. So not only this, so yesterday we also heard that these practices can also influence even at the cellular level, even at the genetic level. So it has been shown that telomerase activity, that is tip of a genetic material, that is DNA, or it has the our positive thoughts and the negative thoughts, right, and perceived control. All these things has a very beneficial effect even at the telomerase activity also. Now, so now this actually slide gives the an overall the concept of how these non-genetic variations. If you look at here, so we have something on culture, emotional state, motivational states. So all these things are related to thoughts, and these thoughts it influences our frontal cortex, and wiring and rewiring of this frontal cortex or strengthening of this frontal cortex in turn, it is related to our behavior, which we can develop into competency in a short term, and in a long term it becomes our in a short term it becomes our performance, and the practice of the same, it becomes our competency. So where, and this is the way actually practicing yoga in its truest sense, right, we will develop our competency, to face the challenges, to be in our field, and also to be to have a very um, contentful life, and we become more competent, which is one of the uh, feature of uh, the human excellence. So that is to say that with all this background in our education today, instead of focusing on the education to do, right, we along with that we should also give an emphasis that how to be. So this has to be like a education to be. So again, back to the Alexis Carrel. So he has a wonderful statement. He said, "The mind is hidden in the living matter. Completely, it is neglected by physiologists and economists, almost unnoticed by physicians. Of course, now the trend is changing. But the further he says, the aim of the civilization is the progress, not of science and machinery, but of mankind. And for the development of this mankind, our thought management, thought sculpting plays a very, very important role. And for us to have excellence in our uh, life, so this is the one statement which says you take up one idea, make that idea of your life. I mean, we have to focus on that idea, think of it, dream of it, live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerve, every part of your body be full of that idea. Just leave every other idea alone. So this is the way of success. Is a very thought-provoking and inspiring statement by Swami Vivekananda. So this is what I shared about in brief about the how yoga can really help in the thought management. And any queries or anything, please feel free to email to ccsnimhans2020 at gmail.com, which is the Center for Consciousness Studies of NIMHANS. Thank you very much. So we'd like to take a few questions. If mind wandering, the root cause or related to procrastination. So as I told that either it is a procrastination or the rumination is the where the thought is not flexible. It is focused to one particular thought of whatever the that event or that is happening. A person is not in a position to realize or the signals that is coming up, okay, his bodily signals or the negative signals that is coming up, and his brain is not in a position to sense that particular signal and bring certain change. But is the mind wandering is the root cause for this procrastination? I'll tell yes, it can be the root cause, because if the person is not really trained or his brain circuits is not in a position to really be very flexible to change from the one circuit to another circuit, it can lead to a procrastination. What specific yoga practices is to do to reduce mind wandering? Now it all depends on when we start practicing yoga, in which state of mind that we are. According to which I showed about the Patanjali, either we are very dull state or very disturbed state. That is better to start with the very vigorous physical exercise, because with the regular physical exercise, lot of variance or the our circuit will be very it becomes very active, and this will enhance our brain capacity to get into vikshipta state, where in spite of mind wandering here and there, okay, we can start concentrating. But generally, in a healthy individual, our mind will be in a vikshipta state. We have the capacity to concentrate, right? And then we can start all the practices. So starting from the asanas to pranayama to dharana. So all these things, it helps to control our mind wandering. As I told you, all these circuits are involved. But the person is very dull, and if a person is very disturbed state of mind, right, or our dharana or concentration or meditation practice is not going to really help him. How long it will take to train the mind from one stage to another stages? We cannot really say how long it takes. It all depends on the person, his intention, and his sincerity and regularity in his practice. Can yoga practice induce neurogenesis and neuroplasticity? Definitely yes. Most of the beneficial effect of yoga has been attributed to the neurogenesis and neural plasticity changes. What about thought management for adult? You mentioned it for children and teens. No. The general principles of the thought management for adults is also the same that what I told, but I emphasized on teens, because why I emphasize on teens is because that particular age of adult or the adolescent is where the frontal cortex biologically it is growing at its peaks, and I only emphasize because that is a very appropriate age to practice all those things so that they develop the capacity for deliberate constraints, or the cognitively they can control their thoughts. Otherwise, the same principle holds good for both, for uh, all the age groups. What is the role of asana in the mind wandering? So I've already explained. So whenever we are doing the asana in a very strict yogic sense, that is where the instruction is given, right, that we have to focus our attention to the posture, and whatever the sensation that is arising because of this practice, we are not cognitively link our emotions to these particular sensations, and to build the chain of thoughts. So these two plays a very important role, right, in constraining the mind wandering. Any yogasana are there for depression? Yeah, there are a lot of studies at NIMHANS from the Integrated Center of Yoga and Medicine. They have done a lot of yogasana for the depression, and various protocols they have developed. So it is available. You can please go through the particular work and the those publications. Please suggest some books on the scientific aspects of managing one's mind. So there are many books. It is written by the great stalwarts and great scientists, and all. One book which I really mentioned today in my presentation was Man the Unknown by the Alexis Carrel. And yesterday, Dr. Vanamballe has told on two books. One is on the flow for the general audience, and the another book for the much more serious people. So there are many such books are available in the market, and you can go through that. Is there any minimum period of yoga practice to bring about behavioral changes in the adolescents? The studies have really shown that you see, in any of these yoga practices, we have two kinds of effects. One is called a straight effect, one is called a state effect. State effect is what that particular effect that any person who experience because of the immediate practice. So I practice yogasana now, I practice pranayama, or practice say sort of meditation, and I feel something. So it is an immediate benefit of that. Then we have something called straight effect, is that because of the long-term practice, whether you are practicing it or not, so you develop certain characteristics, right? So this behavioral change is the resultant of the trait effect or the long-term effect. So how long it should be there? So to get a reproducible minimal effect, right, at various levels. So the question is asked about the behavioral changes, right? At least minimum of 6 to 7 months of regular sincere practice plays a very, very important role to see some the palpable changes. But if this particular change has to be there for long term to become an habit, again, the long term practice and the regular practice is very, very important. Are there any courses are offered in from the Center for Consciousness Studies? Please wait for some time. We can be check the things in the website very regularly in due course of time. We would like to uh, plan certain things. Any other questions? So I think meditative state in daily activates lead to higher consciousness or yoga asana necessary for achieving it. Whoever has asked the question, but I don't know what does it mean by higher consciousness according to the person who has really asked it. But definitely, yes, everyday practice of this yoga definitely enhance your biological capacity to appreciate or to experience higher states of consciousness. And yogasana is also the part of it, but it is not the only part of it. Yogasana is not the dead end of yoga. It is a very initial step or a fundamental step of yoga where you prepares your physical body, right, and to certain extent to psyche for the further practice, and also to have a very higher conscious these experiences.